Many of you don't know Tiara. Tiara is my oldest daughter. And she's where this came from. This is all about her. She is the foundation of this thought. She is the backbone of this thought. She is the, when I talk about tears not falling, you know, she's 28 years old now. She don't think I know, but I know. She's 28 years old now. And for 28 years, I've cried inside about her. I've literally cried inside about her. So when I started writing this book, originally it was just supposed to be a book of letters. And then I started like writing about being a father and writing about, you know, what I thought fatherhood should be. And then I started kind of exploring my own life. And I couldn't continue to explore this thing about fatherhood without exploring the person who made me a father in the first place, you know, my first child. And it forced me to dig into myself. Dr. Mincy always uses this term, along with Robert Johnson, drilling down. It forced me to drill down into my life, because what I realized is that there were some compartments in my life that I had left that had been unexplored, that I had not tapped into those places in my life. So when I thought about that, it changed the whole focus of this book. And the focus of this book then became for me to really begin to look for my tears and to find out what they were and find out who they were and to start to examine what they were and to begin to talk about them and explore them until I could get to a point where I can actually share them and open myself, you know, up about that. And that really was where the transparency came from. And when I started being transparent about those tears, what I found is that the men that I was working with began to open up. And the women that I was working with began to open up. And the children that I talked to began to open up because they were able to see straight through me. But it was in my conversation that they got and made that connection. So what I wanted to do with this book was to really create that transparency, where I could not tell them everything, but I could at least give them something that would allow them to explore areas of their life that they never thought about before. In this book, and I probably won't be able to read this piece without like really tearing up and cracking down. One of the things that I did in this book when I started, actually, I had almost finished the book. And not only is Tiara here, but Nzinga, come here, and Amber, come here. Nzinga is my youngest baby. And Amber is my 16-year-old. And I have a little 6-month-old that's at home, and he's the boy, so that's a whole nother book. That's gonna be crying through the tears. That's what that one is gonna be. But these are my girls. And I spent a lot of time in my life, trying to figure out how to be the best man I could be to my girls. And where I was successful for Nzinga, I failed Tiara. And I struggled with that. And I struggle with that. And I struggle with it today because even in this work, every time I talk about what I've done good, I can't help but go back and dig into what I did bad. So whenever I'm doing this work, it's always reflective of these faces, all three of them. So on one side, when I'm talking about, how I figured it out, because she's 28, she's 10. 18 years it was before I had another child, and I had decided after Tiara, because of our relationship, that I was never going to have children again. Never. And not because I didn't want children, because it was because I anguished so much about my failure in her life. I never wanted to put myself in a position to do that to another child. But God has a way of putting some things in your path that you don't necessarily want, but he will put some things in your path to make you have a different mindset. And when Nzinga was born, I took it hook, line, and sinker, and although her mother and I went through some rough patches, where I failed with Tiara and her mom, I was able to learn and transfer that information to Nzinga and her mom. So I never allowed myself to go back and slide into those areas that I slid into with Tiara, with Nzinga. And even that hurts me sometimes, because when I see the two of them, and they love each other, they probably love each other more than they love me. But when she sees how she is, and she sees how she is, and I'm transparent with all of them, in terms of when I talk to Nzinga, I talk to her about Tiara. And on the times that I talk with Tiara, she knows about Nzinga. They don't know about Amber so much yet, and somebody, Beverly, just kind of hit me a few minutes ago. Amber is my stepdaughter. So, in what I learned with the two of them, I now transfer to her, because Amber also, is a fatherless child. And it was my job, I felt, and what God had placed me in her life to be, was to also make my life as transparent to her as my life is as transparent to my two daughters. So in the back of my book, you will see in the description, it says, Mr. Braswell is the father of 3 beautiful daughters. I don't make a distinction between the 3 of them. I have no stepchildren, and I have no children-in-law. I have children. Sometimes because it's so 3-4 years, it's so new, sometimes I will stumble up and say step, but that's only because of the people, like for instance, when I see people that I haven't seen in a long time, they'll say, well, wait a minute, when she happened? I didn't hear about that. So you have to step back in and you have to explain to people, where that happened. And then KJ, many people have not seen yet, but I'm sure he will make himself known. But I wanted to thank, my family, all of my daughters. I've told Tiara some weeks ago, about the signing and asked her to be here, and we had exchanged, and I didn't think she was coming. So when she walked through the door, my whole world just kind of flashed right in front of my face, flashed in front of my face when I saw her. So I'm glad that she's here, because I really want her to see, what her father's work is about, where her father's work comes from, where she plays in the work that I do, why I'm so crazy about this work. There's a reason that I stay up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning with guys that I'm working with, and I wake back up at 7 o'clock to start all over again. There's a reason why I get in my car and I'll drive to Baltimore, come back to Albany, drive to Philadelphia, come back to Albany, drive to New York, come back to Albany, fly to somewhere, who knows, in New York State, come back to Albany, drive here, because my drive is in making sure that fathers don't stumble through the same mistakes that I stumbled through. That has been what God has placed on me. That's my anointing, that's my blessing, and I'm going to live what he has told me to do. I talk about, in my book, about my transformation, where I transform. Because when Nzinga was born, I was in a whole nother place. I was Kenny Braswell, DJ Quiet Storm, single, remember that? Remember that? Single, bachelor, had a kid, wasn't paying attention and recognizing that I had a kid, thinking that I was just Kenny Braswell on my own. So when Nzinga came along, she was that transformative piece for me. And I had to flip the script on, who Kenny Braswell was. And I had to go into some deep thought, about how I was going to use what God was telling me to use. So this, for me, is very deeply emotional and personal for me. It's overwhelming in some areas. I'm unapologetic for it. And then it's spiritual on a whole nother end. And I don't talk about the spiritual piece of this. I talk about God, with the hopes that you guys know that this stuff is spiritual for me. Moses.